Everyone excited? Ready to go? Okay. So, hi everyone. Welcome to our Love at the Library event. My name is Dina Halick, and I'm from the Free Library of Philadelphia, where I am in charge of the fiction department at the Central Library. My specialty is romance, science fiction, and fantasy, which means this panel is made exclusively for me. It is perfect. And I'm so happy you're all here to join me to talk with these wonderful authors. And thank you for coming and joining the Valentine's Day edition a week early of Love at the Library, brought to you by Source Books and Baker and Taylor. Tonight, we're also streaming live on YouTube, so welcome to everybody attending on YouTube. And I'm thrilled to be here with Scarlett St. Clair, Aguirre, and Kait Ballenger. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items, and I've just been told I froze a little bit, so hopefully that won't happen again. Here's some housekeeping items to share. Our authors will be answering questions a little later in the evening. So if you have any questions for any of them tonight, please use the Google form that's going to be linked in the chat box. Participating in tonight's event, as well as asking questions, will enter you to win a romance book bundle, and the winners will be announced at the conclusion of our event. So let's get started with learning a bit about our wonderful authors. First up, Scarlett St. Clair is the best-selling author of the Hades and Persephone series, the Hades Sage or Saga? Oh my God, did I just make that like really horrible? I am sorry. Anyway, read her stuff, it's awesome. King of Battle and Blood and When the Stars Come Out. She has a master's degree in library science and information studies and a bachelor's in English writing. She's obsessed with Greek mythology, murder mysteries, and the afterlife. You can find pictures of her adorable dog Adelaide on her Instagram at author Scarlett St. Clair, and updates on her books at www.scarlettstclair.com. Next up, say hi, Scarlett. Yay, hi, Scarlett. We have Aguirre. She's a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author with a degree in English literature. Before she began writing full-time, she was a clown, a clerk, a voice actress, and a savior of stray kittens, not necessarily in that order. She grew up in a yellow house across from a cornfield, but now she lives in sunny Mexico with her family and various pets. She likes books, video games, and Korean dramas, and me too, we'll have to talk later. She writes all kinds of genre fiction, more than 50 novels to date. Because she's up on the mountain in Mexico, her internet might be a little bit spotty, so if she pops in and out, that is why, although it seems like I am the one who had some internet difficulties to begin with, so I apologize for that. And finally, we have Kait Ballenger. She is the award-winning author of the 7-Range Shifter Paranormal Romance series. She earned her bachelor's degree from Stetson University, followed by an MFA in writing from Spalding University. After stints in multiple careers, she finally decided that her 8-year-old self knew best. She was meant to be a romance writer. Kait lives with her librarian husband. Look, another library connection. That's 2 out of 3. And 2 young sons in Central Florida. She also teaches romance writing in Southern New Hampshire University's online MFA program. Readers can connect with her by following her on TikTok at Kait Ballenger, or find updates on her books at www.kaitballenger.com. Hello, everybody. It is so wonderful to have you here, and thank you for showing up. Okay, so we are going to have a bit of a discussion to begin with. I've got I have a lot of questions that I want answers to, so we're going to see what we get. And then we are going to get questions from the audience. So have your questions ready, put them in the chat box, and we will get to them at the end. So if I can get you guys to unmute yourself, I'm going to ask, first off, let's just learn a little bit about your books. Tell me what your book is about, and well, your latest book, the book you're talking about here, is about, and how you came up with the idea for it. And since Scarlett is the first on my screen, let's start with you.
Great. Okay.
King
of Battle and Blood. I should know this really well because I've been doing it a while. But King of Battle and Blood is an enemies to lovers romance about a princess named Isolde who basically is placed into an arranged marriage, or agrees to marry the first vampire born of the kingdom that they're in, and she does so to save her people. And as the trope goes, she finds out things are not as they seem, and it's very, very spicy, and sort of took me back to like my roots, which were high fantasy. So I loved sort of diving into something that was just a little bit different, that did not have a foundation like such a foundation like Greek mythology did. So I basically just started writing it though, because the two characters wouldn't stop talking. And I thought, I can write this fast because they won't shut up. And here we are.
And let's move on to you. Let's talk about your witches.
Okay, well, if you want to know how the project came to be, basically I wanted to write for Krista this year, and we had been doing freelance stuff together. And when she went to Source Books, she told me she wanted to acquire some witch books. And I was like, I would love to write you some witch books. So I brainstormed with her. We talked about what we wanted it to be. We wanted it to be like a very feel-good, soft, warm place to land. So I came up with the most cuddly, adorable cinnamon roll love interest I could come up with. And Danica is very much the friend who listens when you've had your heart broken, and she's up to do whatever it takes to comfort you, all the ice cream and all the Netflix, and she'll listen to your sad stories for 12 hours. Like, she's very much that friend. And so I took the two most adorable, warm-hearted, soft and cuddly protagonists and just smushed them together and tried to forget that the outer world was a little terrifying. Basically, I wanted people to be able to open these books and be like, yeah, I wish this is the world I lived in, where there are no sharp edges, you don't hurt yourself when you fall, there's always someone to catch you. They're the ultimate comfort reads, and I wrote them to give people a safe place where they could just exist and feel the love.
So the complete opposite of Scarlett's then. And so we've got our vampires, we've got our witches, and let's move on to our werewolves. Kait, let's talk about your book a bit.
Yeah, so my latest one is Wild Cowboy Wolf, and that is the 5th in my 7 Range Shifter series. So this series basically it kind of started with the question of, if wolf shifters were real, where would they live and what would they do? And so there are cowboys out in Montana near Yellowstone, and so I like to say that they're cowboys by day, wolf shifters by night. So this particular one in the series, most of mine are like enemies to lovers frequently, but this one is my first friends to lovers of the series. So the hero is the security specialist for the pack, and his heroine is the pack's veterinarian. So it's a lot of fun and very sexy and gets dark at points too. So mine is more on the like harder side, like Scarlett's, not quite as soft and fuzzy as Anne's.
Got a spectrum.
Yes, yes.
I would also like to add that I forgot to show my book. So here's the beautiful cover.
Isn't that the most adorable?
Yes,
so
don't let the
cute.
cover fool you. It is spicy. Like, a lot of the reviews were like, this was really sweet, but it was also hotter than I was expecting based on the cover. So if you're not okay with Fade to Black, this is probably not for you, because if you're looking for Fade to Black, I have some spice in here along with the cuteness.
And you brought up already 2 more things I want to talk about. Because Kait, you talked about like friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, and you were talking about cinnamon roll heroes. Let's talk about tropes. What do you like? I mean, what do you like to read? What do you like to write? What's the hardest to write? That's what I want to know. Who wants to go first? And it looks like you're reaching for something. You go first. You have no choice. I'm just calling on you.
Oh no, I was typing in the chat. I'm easily distracted. People were writing comments and I was responding. Which is easier to write, or?
Well, let's start with, what kind of tropes do you enjoy the most?
Gosh, I am a huge sucker for Grumpy Sunshine. The curmudgeon who hates literally everyone except for this one chaos bunny who brings brightness and joy and sometimes unintentional devastation to their very orderly existence. I really enjoy writing a regimented protagonist who wants things a certain way and then introducing a complete bundle of spontaneity who will drag them out of bed in the middle of the night and make them watch the stars for no apparent reason. I mean, that kind of thing. That's probably my number one favorite. I also enjoy a good enemies to lovers. I also enjoy a touch of taboo. I mean, nothing really, really bad, but like your best friend's sibling, perhaps, or maybe someone's ex who was close to you, like that type of situation where it's awkward, but not like societally verboten. I like the awkwardness and how are you going to navigate this and the complexity. Those are all pretty fun for me.
Cool. What about you, Kait?
So my favorite is definitely the enemies to lovers, just because I have a huge soft spot for like the really morally gray anti-heroes. The like dark Brody guys, like I absolutely love them. So like enemies to lovers pairs like really well with that. So that's probably my top favorite. But I also like and love Grumpy Sunshine. I love the chaos monster heroes where it's like they're super all over the place, like wild guys, like swashbucklers almost. Yeah, there's just so many good tropes. I don't know that there's any trope that I won't read, like if it's done well enough. Funny enough, my least favorite is probably friends to lovers, just because I like the tension of them like clashing that you get in enemies to lovers a little bit more. But so writing friends to lovers was kind of a challenge for me in that way.
Why did you do it? What made you decide to do it then?
I just wanted to switch it up, you know, like so many other entries in the series had been like variations of different kinds of enemies to lovers. And I was like, well, they can't all be enemies to lovers. So let's change this, right? Like it just had to be something different. And I think it also just fit this particular hero's story. He is a chaos monster, right? Like he's super smart and like very alpha, but he's also like a total goofball. And I was like, he needs to be the friends to lovers story.
Nice. Scarlett.
Like I'm just going to echo what everyone else said, but I do love enemies to lovers. That's what all my books are enemies to lovers. I love arranged marriage tropes. I think it's because I love Regency romance so much. And I think the reason I love enemies to lovers is because the banter. I think I'm hilarious. And so I love creating that banter, that like push and pull. And I feel like you can't get that with some other traditional tropes. But yeah, definitely I'm all about the broody hero and very strong, like angry female in some ways. Like, I guess not so much angry, but you know, very determined to see her, I guess, like her battles through. So
well, that's like Isolde completely.
Yeah, that's 100. Yeah. I aspire to be Isolde on a daily basis.
Hopefully with less stabbing?
No.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay, fine. We'll leave it at that. So, so all of it's funny that we're doing this now because this would be like the perfect Halloween panel also, because you are totally all like, let's just hit all the major trifecta of paranormal creatures. So you've got vampires, you've got witches, you've got werewolves, you've got them all. What made you decide to go with the supernatural creatures that you did? Kait, I know this is like far into a series full of werewolves, so you might have to dig down a little bit more into your past. Why did you decide on those, and how much of what you did in your creation of your world with your characters is based on mythology that we all kind of know, and how much was your own world building? Let's go with the werewolves first, sure. Then we'll do vampires, then we'll do witches.
Okay, so I think I love writing all different types of supernatural creatures, and I've written other kinds in the past. So, but I really just wanted to go with werewolves for this series because I think there's something fun that you can kind of play with between like making the like both the alpha heroes and the alpha heroines like a little bit rougher and tougher, but also like I wanted to kind of border on like this part of them that's not human, right? Like, and I think that it gives an easy framework to imagine, well, like, what would it be like to be part wolf and live out near Yellowstone where your natural habitat is, and kind of play with this fantasy idea of like running free in the mountains, like wild and majestic sort of thing. And so that's kind of why I was like, okay, it's got to be wolf shifters. And also there's the like, I was trying to steep the world building a little bit in like, I don't want to say reality because obviously like wolf shifters are not reality, but like the idea that like wolves were very endangered out near Yellowstone for a very long time, and now the population is just coming back, and like, and so how would they live out there? How would they thrive among humanity? And so that sort of world building came organically from the thought of like, okay, like wolf shifters in life sort of thing. I remember looking up a lot of stuff about Yellowstone and like the reintroduction of wolves and that sort of thing for the world building. So I think it all just kind of built around that idea of like, okay, how do you put supernatural creatures like in the real world in a way that we can believe?
Oh, that's really cool how you kind of tried to pull it in with like stuff that happened in the real world to this. And with Scarlett, we are not talking about the real world at all. You didn't have that problem at all.
Not with the vampires, but definitely with witches, which are like, kind of a big theme in the book. But I chose that because Adrian basically said that he was a vampire, and so I don't have a beautiful story about that. But I did do a lot of research on vampiric mythology, and I find it very fascinating. I think that vampires are a manifestation of every culture's fears, so they look very different depending on where you live, and that was very intriguing to me, and that's how I built the world. And I loved the idea. I've always felt like vampires are very sexual as well, and I love the idea of having a sex positive main character and then folding in a culture of vampires who were unafraid of sex and all kinds of sex and sexuality as well. So it gave me a really great opportunity to explore something I'm very interested in. So yeah, it was just, I also, I think we always associate vampires with Vlad the Third or Vlad the Impaler. And I did not want any of like that kind of association with Dracula, but I do think that Vlad the Third is a very interesting, morally gray character in history. And I used his sort of trajectory through life to model Adrian's trajectory through the book as a morally gray character.
I have to say, just as an aside, with Isolde, when I was reading the book, and that first bit when it was like a really, you don't usually get like a sex positive heroine like in a high fantasy book, and I'm reading this, I'm like, what the oh and it was like, yes, I am here for this. It was fantastic to read it that way. It was fantastic. Thank you.
I'm glad. Thank you.
And witches, Anne, your fix-it witches.
In terms of what I modeled the witches on, it all started with sisterhood. I wanted the coven to be as important to a witch as their life partner. And there is one pairing in the book who actually has her life partner in the coven. That would be Carrie and Priya. So they actually have the best of both worlds. And I think what I did was I researched the historical precedents of the persecutions and the trials, and I thought it made a lot of sense that if there were actual witches, they would have gone deep, deep, deep underground and completely hidden their identities and pretended to be normal humans and not done magic in the open. And it actually became a huge thing because it's a barrier between our couple. I don't want to give too much away in terms of story in case the audience hasn't read it, but there is a star-crossed or a forbidden love element to the story because witches and humans have to hide. The witches have to hide their true nature, otherwise they fear that persecution could arise again. And given humanity's tendency to mistreat people that they perceive as other with a capital O, I think it's probably not an unrealistic fear on the part of the witches who are in hiding. So everything stemmed from actual historical accounts of the horrific things that were done. And the last name that I gave my witches actually comes from a very famous witch who was executed in England. You can look up the last name Waterhouse if you're at all curious. I said that they were her distant cousins, and then though that line emigrated because England was unsafe, and then North America became unsafe, and everything essentially unfolded from there in terms of the witch culture that exists today. And there are witches who are married to humans who have to keep an entire aspect of their lives secret. And a lot of readers objected to that, which I fully understand. But I will just throw this out there. It is a series. So expecting everything to be resolved in book one is perhaps a little swift. So if you liked the series, but that was one thing that bothered you, keep reading.
I will say that this is an amazingly fluffy book for all this dark backstory that you just told us. And I love the fact that your cinnamon roll hero is literally a baker. That just is adorable. Okay, so let's move on briefly. And I know you talked about this, Anne, so let's start with you. As you said, you wanted something absolutely light and like that brings comfort in the time that we are. How has the pandemic, you knew we were going to get a pandemic question, how has the pandemic affected your writing and your reading? And you can start because you're the one who brought it up.
How has the pandemic affected my reading?
And your writing?
I would say I definitely read more because I don't leave the house and my entertainment options are a lot more limited. So I definitely read more. I play video games more. And I know this has not been the case for some people, but I actually have been very efficient because there's nothing waiting for me out there. So I get up, I eat, I do my work, I do my leisure stuff, I go to bed. It is a little monotonous, but I have been extremely productive. I've written a lot since I've been in lockdown. It was hard at first because there were no vaccines at the early onset, and my husband was very, very ill in 2020. So it was hard for me at first, but as things rolled on, I just kind of accepted it as the new normal. And now I write, I read. And since those are my two favorite things, I kind of feel like the farm boy in all of those high fantasy novels. Yes, I have been training my entire life for this moment. I can now be a good and concerned citizen by staying home and not talking to people and minding my own business. That's what I wanted to do my whole entire life. And I just wish it hadn't happened like this, not like this. I didn't want my time to shine to be like this.
But I'm glad that you've written us lots of fluffy, comforting romances to get us through it. Scarlett, what about you? How has the pandemic affected how you're writing and how you're reading?
This is a very hard question for me because I lost my dad in the pandemic.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It was very hard, and I think that's why I tried so hard to write so much, so I could not face the grief of losing my dad to COVID. So it's my whole life changed. My whole life changed in the best way. I'm talking about this because I think it's important for people to hear. My life changed in the best way possible because during the pandemic, my career took off. and it changed in the worst way possible because I lost my dad. So very, it's everyone is going through some kind of trauma. And what I talk about on my platform all the time is that we have to be kind and remember that we don't know what people walked through these past 2 years. And people tend to forget that. But everything I've done in the last year, my dad would have been so proud. So I just think of him every time I have some kind of accomplishment, or every time we get to a point where we have vaccines ready for people, or anytime like numbers start going down, and I know that he would be happy that things are, I don't like to say returning to normal because there's no new normal. There's no normal. Like, my life changed drastically, but on a path to being new and different, and that's okay, so sorry.
No, that's okay. Oh, I did not know that. I am so sorry. And I think he would be so proud of you.
He is. He definitely is.
Good.
Thank you.
Kait.
So I think for me, it's been we've been in this so long now, and so many people have been affected in multiple ways that like it's been different at different points. So the early part of the pandemic, my husband was immediately furloughed, and he's at that time was our main income. And so that was really challenging to suddenly have that like pressure of, oh my gosh, I've got to get things done. Luckily for me, it didn't freeze me up. Like I feel like it could have potentially, but for me, it was like, okay, I've got to crack down. I've got to like get more work done than ever, more writing done than ever. Cause I've got to, I don't know when he's going to go back to work. I don't know, if I'm going to be the only one paying the bills, sort of thing. And so, so I cranked out a lot of projects in that time. So a lot of proposals for other series that I'm pivoting into eventually, and lots of books. And so, yeah, I guess in that way you can say it's been good for my writing, but I don't know that it was necessarily born out of anything good. But I have made forward movement in my career, I think, as a result. He did get called back to work, and things are stable now and that sort of thing, so that was a big relief for us. But that too was another sort of change in dynamic, because when he got called back to work, we have 2 small sons, and so and we were homeschooling my oldest for the first year of this, so it was like I suddenly had homeschool stuff and a toddler in tow, and I was trying to write at the same time, so it was a little bit of insanity. Things are much calmer for us now. Husband's back at work, my son's back in school, everybody's vaccinated in our family, so it feels a little bit calmer, but I know it's not that way for so many people, which can weigh on you when you're trying to be creative and access those really deep parts of yourself, and everybody's hurting, right? That can be really difficult, but I've tried to kind of keep my writing as an escape from all of that, and think of it as a place that okay, this is somewhere that I can go, that it allows me to not think about all the craziness going on in the world. And I hope that it is that for my readers too. As far as what I've been reading, I like Anne said, I've just been reading more because I'm in so much. So, I guess that's a happy side effect, you could say, is getting to read lots of wonderful books. But, I wish the world wasn't having to go through this for things like that to happen. So.
Yeah. Well, that was heavier than I thought it was going to be. I apologize. And we're going to move on to, I do want to move on to audience questions. I have so many more questions, people, but there are actually some that kind of go together. So one of the ones that came up in the chat earlier is, how do you relate to your characters basically once you've read the book? And I had, how do you interact with your past work? How does the book that you read 5 years ago, do you still think about it? Do you go back to it? Do you interact and kind of interrogate it in any way? And I know, Anne, you had something to say about this when we were chatting the other day. So we're going to start with you. How do you relate to your past work?
The past is another country. I really don't think about books that I have written or dwell on them. I mean, occasionally in passing, I think, God, I wish I was better at this. I wish I had done a better job of executing this particular thing, or I wish that I had made a few changes. But when a book is published, it's really not yours anymore. It belongs to the readers, and it lives with them after you let it go. I mean, this is a little bit corny, but I kind of think of a book as like a bird that I have set free, like, go fly, book, fly, you're not mine anymore. And then I just keep moving forward. So whenever people are like, what is your favorite book that you've ever written? It's always the one that I'm writing right now, because it's the one I'm living with. It's the one that's in my head. It's the one whose characters won't shut up. I guess I don't really see any benefit to obsessing over my past body of work. That's why it's a little heartbreaking when readers are like, that book you wrote in 2009, it changed my life, and I really want you to write 10 more just like those. And I'm like, oh no, that's disappointing, because that will never happen. I said what I had to say about that, and I don't live looking in my rear view. I'm just always on the road moving forward.
Scarlett, this is actually going to, Kylie in the chat said that you sent out a letter when you did King of Battle and Blood, saying that you couldn't do anything else until you got those ginormous personalities on paper. And I think that kind of like dovetails with this question also, is once you've done that, how do you do you have to go back and think about it as you go forward, or what happens there?
I don't know I don't know how to reconcile those two questions.
We can break them up. How do you deal with your past work? Are you like Anne, where it's done and you move on?
No, I will never move on. I do and I don't. So right now I'm in the situation where I'm doing a dual POV, separate books, right? It's the Hades and Persephone series and the Hades saga. So it forces me to return to, the previous books and read through them. And I hate it. I do hate it with every ounce of my being, but I am very dedicated to my characters, and not like, it in the sense that they are mine, and I don't so much set a book free. Like, I wish I could do that. Like, I admire you so much for being able to do that, but I'm like, I will die on this hill because I relate so much to my characters. I feel as though I was able to work through my identity as a woman via writing Persephone and Isolde. So very protective of those characters. With King of Battle and Blood, getting those characters out of my head, that was like a fever dream, and I wrote that book in 2 months. It's actually probably less time or more time than I actually have taken to write A Game of Retribution. And but so what I found myself doing more often is going back and reading passages from that book, like it's nostalgia. And I don't usually like to do that, because I'm like, oh God, I would have changed that. But not with this book. And I think it's because I didn't spend a lot of time with it. It was just so shocking, like how fast I had to write it, and then we had to get it into production. So I'm just now realizing that that's probably why I did that. I do that. So I hope I answered your question.
So once again, Scarlett and Anne are on complete opposite sides of the spectrum. Kait, where do you fall?
I'm probably more in line with Scarlett. I would say like I don't want to go back and reread my past books if I have, I will if I have to, but I'm just like, I cringe as I'm reading them. But at the same time, they're my characters, and they're such a part of me that they feel like they're my babies, and they're always going to be there and accessible. And especially writing the Seven Rain Shifter series, where they're all part of this wolf pack, right? The secondary characters will frequently show up in later books, and they make appearances, and they help with the plot line of other heroes and heroines. And so writing the last book in this series, because the very last one comes out in June, Cowboy Wolf Outlaw, like that was really hard for me because I did not want to say goodbye to them. And I mean, the fortunate part is the series I'm doing next takes place in the same universe as them, like, so, but it's not focused on them, but I'm still like holding out hope in my heart that I can like maybe like slip in a secondary character here and there, because I don't want to let them go. But yeah, it's hard to engage with your past work, I think. And I'm going through that a bit right now because the next series that I was talking about that exists in the same world, it's a previous series that I'd written for another publisher and I'd gotten the rights back. So I am having to go back through those books because they're 10 years old at this point and brush them off and kind of make them a little bit fresh again. And so it's like, which is kind of awful to have to do because I'm like, oh, I have to read my old books.
Oh, that actually, Donna has a question. Is it Donna? Yes. If you could go back into your past, Kait, which you are doing right now, what writing advice would you give to your younger self?
Okay, so I think the writing advice I would give my younger self would be to read more widely in the genre. Not that I hadn't read plenty of romances before I started writing them, but I think that I had it in my head at the time that like, oh, well, you know, if I'm writing paranormal romance, I'm not supposed to be like reading in that genre and as I'm actively working on the book. And now I think that that writing advice is just kind of bogus. So I would tell myself, don't worry about it, just read all the books you want to read and like that will spark inspiration. But I think I would have also told myself to like look for like a greater series arc, because since I am a series writer and now I've written like a complete 6-book series, I would go back to my younger self that was writing my previous books and be like, okay, yes, it's a couple each book and they each get their HEA, but how can we make this more overarching? And that's kind of what I'm doing right now with that previous series.
So you're kind of going back and retrofitting the whole thing.
Yeah,
retrofitting is the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm giving it a greater arc as a series whole rather than just focusing on each couple in each book. I mean, like, there's definitely an HEA at the end of each one, you know, in line with what I'm doing in my 7 Range Shifter books, but at the same time, like, there's little threads that can kind of weave through for readers who want to read each entry in the series, and I don't think I did that with that previous series, so I'm trying to make that happen this time around.
Got it. What about you, Scarlett? What advice would you give younger Scarlett?
I would just keep reminding her that people's opinions, especially in traditional publishing, do not have any influence on whether or not you're a good writer, because I think too often I and other authors think that a no or, you know, is like a gate closed and it's just another path forward. So I would try to shake her, make her understand that. But I got there eventually, so.
Good. And you probably have the longest career of everybody here. So, and I've been reading you since the beginning. So when I say, what kind of advice would you give your younger self? I read those early books. What kind of advice would you go back and tell that person?
Well, first, thank you for that. It's been a long time. And I think I would tell myself that it's okay to be weird, because my early stuff was not as weird as I wanted it to be. I made some choices that were more conventional and more safe because I wanted to stay published. And rather than writing what my inner weirdo really wanted to write, I was like, okay, no, I'm gonna take the safe path and I'm gonna toe the line. And much later, I have written these tremendously weird alien romances, which, apart from my dystopian YA, are the most popular thing I have ever written, like ever, which is just wildly exciting to me because I am writing these super weird romances and readers are here for it. And I'm just delighted by that. So I would tell young Anne that it's okay to be a weirdo, that you will find other weirdos who will love your weird stories.
I wonder if you could have done those stories 10, 20 years ago without the kind of explosion of self-publishing that has happened. Because, I mean, your alien ones are self-published. They were like serials, they're serials in your newsletter. That's how they started out, and that's how I discovered them. And I promise I would not fangirl about them. I won't, but everyone should read Strangelove. So I don't know if being a weirdo 20 years ago would have worked. And it would have been a different reception, I think. Okay, we have process questions. Everybody loves process questions, right? So Miriam asks, would you talk about your writing process? Do you write intensively? Do you have a first reader group? Oh, Carly asked the same one. I don't know if Miriam and Carly are the same person. Scarlett, let's start with you, since you have a very intense fan base here in the chat.
It's probably my street team. No, Anne and I have the same editor, Krista, and Krista and I, she's really the only person who sees my work. Like, we just go back and forth. And I flew out to Chicago like last week, and I sat in her she shed and wrote my book. I wrote like 50K in like a week and a half, and I could sit there with her, and every time I got stuck, I could be like, this is what I don't know what I'm doing here. And she's like, you're overthinking everything. Every answer is you're overthinking it. You're overthinking it. Make it simple. And then I could move on. And that's how I was able to write so much, because she was there to like bounce ideas off of. So when I'm here in Oklahoma, I just text her and I'm like, I can't figure this out. Do you have time for a call? So she's my first and only line of defense. And I love her.
And Kait, are you still balancing homeschooling your kids with writing?
No. My oldest is back in school now, but I do still have a toddler at home. I have a 3-year-old. So
wow. So how do you do your writing?
So the way my husband's schedule kind of works, he doesn't go into work until like mid-morning. So I get up first thing in the morning, like bright and early, go out to my she shed, lock the door, and like just shut myself in there. And that's how I get my work done. It's kind of like born of necessity, but I do also like getting writing out of the way first thing in the morning, because like I think I haven't allowed like any other like media or thoughts or like things going on in my life like into my head, so I can just like have that space to be creative, and then I like feel like energized by the fact that I've like met my word count and I can go about my day.
Nice. And what about you, Anne, up on your mountain in Mexico?
I actually could not agree more with that. I am not an early morning person, but whenever I do get up, like I basically eat some food and then I immediately get to work if I have word count to do. If I get on social media, or if I talk to people, or if I wander around the house, I am so easily distracted. I mean, I could follow my cat around the yard for 2 hours if I let myself. We have a neighbor cat that's desperately trying to move in. Like, I could lose time talking to her. We have strays that we take care of. And like, if I let myself wander off mentally, that's a day that I'm not going to get back. Like, I have to lock onto my book straight away, get into that headspace, write what I need to write about the characters. Otherwise, that day is just pretty much into the void. Like, and it's a little frustrating because like some people will talk about, yeah, you know, I love that quiet time at night after the day is done. And I'm like, at night, I am wide awake, but I'm wanting to do other things. Like, I would rather play video games or watch Korean dramas. Like, I just want to get my work done, like Kait said, so that I can get on with the rest of my day. Like, I feel like I've checked the box. Yes, I'm on schedule, because I am very much about the schedule. I will just I will just do the math. Like, I want this book to be 85,000 words. This is how many days I have to write it. This is how many words I have to write per day in order to make that deadline. And I need an extra week in order to read it over and do some edits before I turn it in. Like, that's basically how I manage everything. And if I don't get locked in, the more likely I am to be distracted by something, or something annoying will happen and it'll completely torpedo my mood. Like, I'm no longer in the mood to write this happy, joyous story. Now I'm cranky. And if I go into my book with this bad attitude, everyone will suffer. My characters will be fighting for 4 pages and like, but why? That wasn't even part of my plan. It's just because the author's in a mood. So it's better for me not to write under those circumstances.
And we had a question earlier in the chat, and it was a question I had too, and I know, Anne, you want to talk about this, is if you were not writing romances. And we will broaden it out to, if you weren't writing romances, what would you write? And I think you have a lovely, unique answer to this. What would you like to be writing, Anne?
I am actually working on a mobile game. It's a reality dating show game. I was actually working on that up until the point when I logged on. I'm writing day 1 and all of the flirting and the opening chats and all that sort of thing. I haven't gotten too far. I have gotten a little of the art done, and I still need to find a programmer to turn it into a game. But I think it'll be super fun if you like that sort of thing.
It's still romance adjacent.
It's completely romance. The game is all romance. There's no fighting. The character is on the show to win money and find love. I mean, it's a romance game.
That's wonderful. I love it. Scarlett, if you were not writing romance, what would you want to write?
When I was in college, I took a lot of poetry classes because I've always been obsessed with like how people can reduce like such a huge and beautiful thought into just simple words, a few simple words. I just think it's amazing. And so I'd love to be able to write beautiful poetry and amazing songs, but I can't. So I'll just write romance, but whatever.
You found your niche and you're good at it.
I did, yeah. I'm not good at metaphor and poetry, so I did get an A in the class, but I don't think that means that my skills are applicable to the real world.
Well, I don't know. Kait, you're a professor of romance writing. You might want to give her some tips on beautiful poetry.
I don't know that I can handle poetry. So poetry is not my forte. So I actually have some work that is, I guess, technically in the non-like adult romance space, but it still has romance. So I have a YA fantasy novel that's out on submission with the Trab publishers right now. And I'm actually working on another YA fantasy proposal, but they all have strong romantic elements. I can't imagine myself writing a book that doesn't have like really strong romance to it. But if I had to try a different medium, I would probably try screenwriting. I did a semester in my MFA in screenwriting and had a lot of fun doing it. And so like I could see myself in like a screenwriter's room working on like a crime drama or something.
Would there be a strong romantic element?
Of course.
Of course. Renee asks, how much of a break do you take between books? And is it hard to switch between series when you're writing? Well, Kait is nodding emphatically there. So let's go to her. And then Scarlett, you're writing 2 series at once. So we'll do you next.
Yeah, it is really hard to like let go of one project and move to another for me. Like, you know, sometimes, especially when you're not so much when you're working in the indie space, but when you're working in the trad space, like sometimes you get a call from your agent and you're like, you've got to drop this and work on, you know, something like for this publisher or this thing, right? And that making that switch can be really hard because when my head is like in the book, it's in the book and I don't want to switch to something else. Like I want to just stay on that story. but I mean, once the book is like complete, I'm so ready to like throw it and be done with it and like never look at it again, that like it's like on to the next project. But I do usually take like a short break in between, just to where I almost like spend a ton of time like binging a ton of media. Like I read a ton and I watch a ton of shows and like anything to kind of like fill up the inspiration well before I go like back to the next project.
And I saw in the chat, Scarlett, somebody said Scarlett does not get breaks. So
we joke all the time about this because well, I do it to myself, honestly. But I think I have 3 books coming out this year. 2 of them I'll write from start to finish this year, and then 1 is an edit. But I get about a month between projects if possible. This February was supposed to be my month off beginning for after I finished A Game of Retribution, and then I would move on to Queen of Myth and Monsters. But we pushed that to March because we added in an edit to When Stars Come Out. So I just try to not go insane, and but I want to keep momentum up for my readers. So I don't know. But also, what else am I going to do if I'm not writing? I don't have hobbies and I don't watch TV. So, I mean, this is all I do. So it's fine.
I mean, your readers appreciate it. So that's
they do. And they want the book, like once it's out, it's like the next week, they're like, when's the second? And I'm like, can hold on. I still have to write it. I think they think it's in my back pocket, and I wish it was, but it's not.
Not how brains work. It'd be nice if it did. And what about you?
Well, I am not good at multitasking as far as drafting goes. If I can avoid it at all, I simply do not write multiple books simultaneously. I just organize my schedule so that I won't have to. Sometimes there is cross-pollination with different stages, like I'll have a book in edits, I'll have another book in proofreading, and then I'll have another book that I'm drafting. That all engages different parts of my brain, so I don't have trouble with the multitasking. Like I am fully capable of writing 3,000 words, 1 chapter, and then I take a break, and then in the afternoon, I'll do, say 50 pages of proofreading or 50 pages of editing on another project. That's entirely different. It utilizes a different skill set. Drafting is creating something from nothing. Editing is refining what's already there. Proofreading is catching mistakes that everyone else, including me, has let slip. So those are all different skill sets, and I can do those 3 things in the same day with no problem. Writing on the same project is really not possible for me. It's the times when I have done it, I was pretty miserable and exhausted. Like I remember one point around 2010 when I was writing under a different name, I would write Anne Aguirre books in the morning and Ava Gray books in the evening because of overlapping deadlines, and that kind of sucked. I determined very quickly that multiple projects drafted simultaneously is not for me. And since then, I've been better at managing my time and organizing my schedule so that I just don't have that overlap, thankfully.
Okay, so we are coming close to the end of the question period. We've got a few more. Donna asks, what has been your favorite comfort or escapist read during the last few years? Do you have a favorite book you want to share? Kait.
I'm like sitting here thinking. Oh gosh, there's been a couple that I've really loved as let's see, escapist. So probably I really loved Katie Roberts' Neon Gods and Electric Idol recently. Those have been really good. And I don't know that this one is necessarily escapist, but I also love anything written by Alexis Hall. I know we kind of spoke about him the other day. So Boyfriend Material, absolutely loved it. I thought it was hilarious and totally funny. So like, it's not really necessarily escapist because it takes place in the real world, but it was escapist just because it was so much fun.
What about you, Scarlett? When do you have
I
time
was
to read?
looking at my Kindle. I know that's I've been horrible about my TBR last year and this year, but I did read Canary. I love mafia romances, and I read Canary by Tejan, and I really enjoyed that. And Sweet Temptation by Cora Riley. I love Regency romance, so I was like on a binge with I think Amelia Howard and Allison McLean and Grace Burrows. I was reading a lot of really hot men in kilts, and that was really great. And so yeah, I'm pretty much on the mafia. So if you have mafia romances or Regency romance I should read, tell me.
I've never read a mafia romance. Huh. I feel like I need to go do one now.
What? Okay,
No.
so some of them can be very similar, but I find that comforting. Like I know there's this thing in like generally people are like, oh, romances are all the same, and they're really not. I think sometimes we find a lot of comfort in like some predictability, and that's like the happily ever after part, right? And that's what I love about I mean, it's like dark and gritty, but we usually end up with a happy ending. So that's what I want.
Oh, it's a romance. At least you have that guaranteed at the end, right? What about you, Anne? Comfort reads.
Well, any book I enjoy is pretty much a comfort read. If I don't enjoy it, it's uncomfortable and I don't finish it. I don't think there's anything wrong with not finishing books. When I was really poor and a student, if I spent my hard-earned money on a book, I would read it cover to cover, even if I hated it, because like that was food money. Now that I have a little more disposable income, I buy a book, and if it doesn't work for me, I just shrug and like buy another book, which is good for the author, good for me. But in terms of books I've really enjoyed recently, I love Rebecca Weatherspoon's Cowboy series. And I really love Jeannie Lin's historicals that are set in China. Those are fantastic as well. I would recommend both those books series by those authors. They're awesome.
Nice. I know I shouldn't ask an in-depth question right now, but I just saw one from Sean Preet, which is, where do you draw your inspiration from? Where do you draw your inspirations from, and any titles you might recommend? So quick lightning round. Give me a book that has maybe not directly inspired you, but what inspires you like in your latest series? Scarlett.
Like the book I'm writing or the last book?
You know what? You are writing a book now, so you're in that headspace. So what is inspiring the book you're writing right now?
I think, well, it's not even, I just, it's just Greek myth, I think. It's pulling from the myths that I'm folding into, you know, and then kind of calling to fun things that this is a terrible answer to that.
Oh,
but
it's fine.
It's just pulling parallels from the previous books. So like, you know, that's very fun. And it's sort of the excitement that I think my readers will get out of it is like what inspires me to keep doing it, because it's like, you know, putting the cows in from A Game of Fate and like some Aphrodite and Hades banter. Like I know my readers will love that. And so that's
so you're inspiring
exciting.
yourself.
Well, I'm inspired because I get excited about how I think my readers will react to it. Because they're so fun. Like, look, Rebecca's got a cow in the chat. So it's like, it's a thing. We have like inside jokes, and I know they're gonna get it, and that inspires me.
I think that's fantastic. Kait, what about you? Give me an inspiration.
So I mean, I draw inspiration from everywhere, but I actually have so this might be interesting. I have an id list where it's like, if something just really just lights up my brain, I'm like, it goes on the id list. And it could be something from a trope or just like a character behavior or that sort of thing. And then like, it all just sort of combines together to like form what's in my head, I guess.
Well, writers are magic. I don't understand writing brain, but it's something I can't do, and you guys are so impressive. And what about you? Yeah. Like literally big gaping hole in me, filling it up with words from you.
I would say that my most amazing ideas come from incredibly vivid, incredibly detailed dreams. When I wake up with just a bunch of scenes already in my head from a dream I've had, I'm like, maybe I need to write this as a book because there's just so much material. Like, I'll give you a really super quick example of a really incredibly vivid dream. I told myself I was done writing aliens, but then I had this super vivid, detailed dream about it's a different world than the galactic one, but still a weird romance. This woman sells a bunch of her eggs in order to buy her own starship, and then she doesn't even think about it. But then she comes to find out that one of her offspring, let's say, has ended up in the foster care system in space and is being raised by an alien, and she wonders if that's okay. So she goes to the colony just to make sure it's all good, and then she ends up falling in love with the alien dad. And I'm like, where does this something that weird come from? Is that something I should write? Would anyone want to read something that weird?
I'll read it. Like, seriously, I will read that in a heartbeat. I love that. Chanpreet, I hope that was the answer you were looking for, because that is the best answer I have heard. Like, vivid dreams about alien adopted egg offspring. That's hilarious. Okay. On that note, we are going to end our chat today. Thank you everyone who participated in tonight's event. And yes, Emily has posted the winners' names in the chat, so be sure to check there to see if you have won a romance book bundle. If your name is listed, oh, hang on, it's scrolling up the screen. Donna Rasmussen, Chanpreet Singh, and Renee Wilson. Email Emily Ludloff at sourcebooks.com. It's in there, so write that down before you leave, so she can send you your prize. And if you are a mystery fan, we'd love to have you at our February Mystery at the Library event on Wednesday, February 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern for a special event with Eva Yurchek, who wrote the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections. I have the arc of it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited for it. If you're interested in hearing more, we have entered the registration information for this upcoming event in the chat. I say this, and yet I don't see it in the chat. Emily, get on that. It's up higher. If you scroll up, you'll see it. So thank you for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the evening. Happy week before Thanksgiving. Oh, and there's the registration link just in time. Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you, Anne. Thank you, Kait. Thank you, Scarlett. And we're all super excited to read your next book.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you so much for joining me. It's so much fun.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.